Welcome everyone to another installment of the Advanced Work Packaging Community of Practice webinar series. We've been doing a special feature on sessions that will be presented at the upcoming CII Advanced Work Packaging Research Virtual Summit. And today is our final presentation from that series, focused on RT365, promoting the use of advanced work packaging. So thanks for signing up. I'm going to hand it over to our facilitator, Lloyd Rankin.
Great. Well, thanks, Steve. This is kind of historic. I believe we've just hit our 20th webinar since the reboot, and we have grown our membership. If you take into account the membership of the North American chapter and the new South American chapter that just was created last month, we've actually grown the membership by 250% in 5 months. So I think that's quite an accomplishment. We would like to remind you that if you have friends and associates that you think would benefit from being members of the Community of Practice, you can go into the Community of Practice, hit the Invite Connections button, and select those people that you think would enjoy being part of the group. So strongly recommend you do that. Steve, you want to move the slide forward one more? So let's get right into the session today. The RT365 is going to be reporting out on the 1st and 2nd of September, and they've been diligently working on how to promote advanced work packaging. And I'm here, just to clarify, primarily as the facilitator for today. But the stars for the day are Robin Mickelson, who is the co-chair of the promotions team, and Mike King and Chuck Mize, who are both members of the team. And so between the three of them, we're going to get some really good insights today. So can I now introduce the panelists, starting with me. So I'll be facilitating today. I am on the deployment committee, and we've been involved in advanced work packaging since it was WorkFace Planning back in 2003. Passionate supporter of this, member of CII. We've hosted international conferences in Canada, the United States, and London. And as a member of CII, I've got to say I'm so impressed at what the research teams have been able to come up with. We've had owners, contractors, technology companies, and academics working together to come up with some really great findings. So let's move to the next slide, Steve. And Robin, you're the chair, so can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Lloyd. So again, my name is Robin Mickelson. I work for ConstructX, and I have the pleasure of having been involved now since way back when I first met Lloyd, probably 20 years ago now, in AWP and WorkFace planning methodologies in the industry for a very long time. Working with ConstructX has given me the ability to be heavily involved with CII. I've had the ability to be involved in 12 different research teams now, including 272A, B, 319, and then recently the 3 series around AWP advancements. And I'm very excited here to be talking and promoting 365 today and into the virtual summit. Thanks, Lloyd.
Great. And Steve? We also were fortunate to have Mike King on the call. So Mike, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Black & Veatch is an employee-owned engineering, procurement, construction company with a track record in delivering sustainable infrastructure since 1915. And my role as AWP project manager for Black & Veatch is providing that leadership direction for the development of the processes and training and project implementation support related to AWP. CII has a lot of great information and helping identify what that means for Black & Veatch and Black & Veatch projects is what I do. My experience spans about 20 years of EPC, construction management and construction projects. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thanks very much, Mike. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Chuck Mees. And Chuck, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Very well. Thank you, Lloyd, for letting me have the opportunity to participate today. My name is Chuck Mees. I'm a senior manager in worldwide field operations for Autodesk. Been involved in design construction for about 35 years. The team that I work on is an interesting team. What we do is we look at the entire ecosystem around a project and try to understand all of the process nuances as well as workflows and data connectivities within those. I've enjoyed the opportunity of being focused at advanced work packaging now for 4 years. That's gotten me really deeply involved with CII, where I represent Autodesk as a member there. Been involved in several of the CBAs. This is my third research engagement that I've been a part of, and I'm currently a member of the Strategic Planning Committee for CII.
Great. Well, thanks for that introduction, Chuck. Robin, could you tell us a little bit about the team?
Yeah, you bet, Lloyd. So you've had the opportunity to meet a couple members of the team, both Mike and Chuck, who've previously introduced themselves. But we had a great roster of highly skilled individuals that volunteered their time to help out with RT365. And as we're going to present here today and into the summit, you're going to see that these people have produced some amazing research. And without the volunteerism of these skilled individuals, we would not have this great report and tool that we're going to be telling you about here. So thanks, Lloyd.
Okay. And so let's now ask Robin his first question. So it seems a little daunting what your team was asked to do. And I'm just curious, how did you get started on this, without giving away the findings that you're going to be presenting us with next week?
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. I think daunting is a good word for it. Another word that I would kind of give would be vague. I hate to say, it's a strong mandate, one that was given to us with the thought of figure this out. It needs to be done, and I think we've done that as far as deciding what and where the research was going to take us. We started out with a basis of we weren't exactly sure what we were going to do, whether we were going to produce a tool, we were going to produce a paper, how exactly our research was going to guide us through our hypotheses to an actual solution. And we took the stance of doing extensive interview in the field and survey. And through those interviews and surveys, it led us down the path to create what is going to be a great tool that we're going to be presenting at the summit, and I think you're going to be excited to see it there. So through many of you that are probably listening here today, and the parent teams of our volunteers, as well as several hundred others, we did the surveys and the interviews and came up with what we believe is a really good cross section of barriers in the industry and how to alleviate those. And the research kind of spoke to us on what it is that we needed to do.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Robin. You're a subject matter expert. So how did what you learned through your team compare to your own personal experience?
Well, I think the things that were most interesting to me, as I mentioned in my introduction, I've been involved in AWP and, before it was called AWP and before it was even called WorkFace Planning with these types of methodologies. And I've experienced many barriers or issues in the field with implementation, but I think from the research, the breadth and the commonality of certain barriers and shared experiences of the clients and those that we're implementing in the field, I think was some of the most interesting things. We're all in it together, and some of the research proved that we really are all in it together, even though we may be getting some different results. A lot of the things we're experiencing are the same and can be tackled with similar methodologies.
Okay, that's good to know. So let's now go to Mike. Your position title actually includes advanced work packaging in it. So how do you feel that what you've learned will actually help you on the job?
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. A good question. You know, the information from CII RT 272, provided a good foundation for Black & Veatch to build upon. As we adapted this best practice, to our AWP program, right? BV had historically performed WorkFace planning, and with AWP, we're still in the beginning stages, of full implementation throughout the project delivery value chain, right? AWP is not just for construction, but something that starts at the very beginnings of the the feed or the proposal stage and carries it all the way through. Through this project, I really appreciated the feedback from the participating companies, not only the people on the team, but also through the interviews and the surveys and the barriers that they encountered along their AWP journey, and the creative solutions that they came up to help resolve those barriers was something that I could really helped me take back to the team at Black & Veatch, and share with them and adapt to meet our department level or project level specific needs.
Hey, so thanks very much for that, Mike. Chuck, your team identified a large number of barriers. Were there any of the findings about those barriers that you found particularly surprising or interesting?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it in the context of being probably one of the newer people to AWP that was working on the team. What I found surprising was that of all of the barriers that we identified those barriers across companies that represented a great deal of difference in AWP maturity, as well as across many stakeholders from engineering through construction through procurement and supply chain. And what was interesting was that some of the barriers we found were consistent across all stakeholders, irrespective of their maturity or role. An example there, and these are the barriers that we released in phase 1 of our work in March. An example there would be pushback. The idea of internal or external pushback of somebody just being resistant to the process was consistent across all of the stakeholders, no matter how long they'd been doing it. However, some of the barriers were very much related to a company's maturity or a company's role. And an example I'll use there from our phase 1 work was around training. So all companies consider training important, but higher maturity companies didn't consider training a barrier to adopting AWP, but lower maturity companies, people who were just beginning on their AWP barrier, found training to be one of the most significant things that they were up against in their organization. So that, I think, was really surprising. There was one other thing that I found very interesting, and that was, after interviewing all of the companies we did and surveying all of the companies we did, grouping all of the barriers, how consistent the findings that we had in 365 were with the barriers that were identified in 272 and 319. It was some really interesting validation for not only our work, but the work of those earlier research teams. So that's what we found, Lloyd.
Oh, I appreciate that, Chuck. So now I've got a question for all three of you. And we'll take it in order, Robin, Mike, and then Chuck. You had a team that was really well thought out. You had owners, you had contractors, technology providers, and also academics. What did you learn from your teammates? Robin?
Well, I think some of the key things that I learned from the teammates was, first off, some of the research methodologies that we used and such were great tools that hadn't used previously and worked really well. The other thing is that we had some great discussions that helped us come to a consensus of how to deliver our research findings in a pretty cool and unique way. I don't want to disclose too much, but I think it's going to be pretty impressive when you do see it at the summit. Bringing that forward and through the group discussions with our teammates, developing this tool, I think, was probably the key thing for me, and it was impressive, and I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. Mike, I know this was your first research team, so I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. Yeah, it's true. It is my first opportunity to participate, and I really appreciated the breadth, of the team members, from owners to EPC and construction contractors to the technology providers. What also I really appreciated was the team's passion for the topic, right, and their seek to understand and continuous improvement mindset around AWP, right?
Yeah, it sounds like
really. I really like the feedback, that teams provided, what was working for them, what they tried and didn't work, and their next thoughts for implementation, specifically around the cultural change, training, as Chuck mentioned earlier, and just the nuts and bolts of staffing and execution. How things are a little bit different with AWP. We're great, and I'm glad that we were able to capture that in part of the research.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. Chuck, what did you think?
Well, Robin talked about the methods, which I thought were spectacular, and I agree with Robin there. Mike mentioned culture and some of the things that happened there, but it really was about the team was assembled such that there were very many different perspectives. I think Robin also alluded to this, that when we would get stuck, it would be one of the other members of the team who might have a perspective that might get us back onto the right path or get us going again. One of the most important things I learned individually as working a part of such a diverse team is that the guy from the technology company has to admit that AWP isn't about technology, that it's really about a process transformation. And it's really about how do we transform an entire industry process, and that technology does have a role, but it's only being as catalyst. So there's certain things that technology can facilitate, but working on this team with industry practitioners, for me, Lloyd, was really valuable to help understand and make that connection.
Great. Well, it sounds like there's a reason why you and Robin have been on multiple research teams, and why I'm sure Mike will be on some more in the future. So let's start with Mike on this question, and then we'll go to Chuck and then to Robin. As a strong supporter of advanced work packaging, if it works, why do we need to promote it? Won't it just naturally happen? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Lloyd, it's a good question, right? As I noted earlier, Black & Veatch is in our beginning stages of full, project lifecycle AWP implementation. So this is new to many of our project managers and project teams, right? And helping them to understand what's changed, since their last project, on a role-by-role basis sometimes is key. Also, helping them to understand, the key principles of AWP is key, as well as helping them to identify what are some of those practices, that make it project specific for them, make AWP fit for purpose and scalable to their particular condition is important. So when I think of promotion, I think of that in the terms of how do we make it real for our project managers and project teams that, you know, probably just came off of a project where they didn't touch AWP, and they need to at least understand what's changed.
Great. And Chuck, your thoughts?
Well, Lloyd, what I thought when you asked us this question, and I was preparing, was, you know, it's really about, if you're a student of Jeffrey Moore and have read his book Crossing the Chasm, you understand that there's always your innovators and early adopters that will embrace change and do so quickly. And then right behind that group of people, there's what Jeffrey calls the chasm. And then that leads to the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. And I think AWP as a process methodology is firmly up against the chasm right now. There are innovators and early adopters as organizations that have done this, but as Michael just mentioned, you know, within his company, there are innovators and early adopters who have done this. So I think right now is the absolute most important time to be promoting advanced work packaging, because it's only through that promotion and taking the lessons learned and the experiences and the successes of those innovators and early adopters, convincing that early majority and late majority to follow along, that we can get advanced work packaging across the chasm where we can actually make it successful. So I think, you know, the timing is right now, and now's when we need to promote it the most.
That's very insightful. Robin, you led the team. You must have had this question cross your mind once or twice. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's one that we're asked often with this group. Even, what does promote mean? Are we building commercials? Are we hitting social media so that there's an awareness behind AWP? The truth is, I think it's more of a situation of, you know, how do we promote people to understand where to get the information? How do they actually move to that next level? How do they increase the complexity and the value benefit that they're getting from their present AWP implementations? AWP has been proven to work, but for many, it's often a challenge to get past that blank page syndrome of, what do I do next? Where do I really get those answers? What should I be doing to set up a fully functional AWP department? Where do I find the information to do this? Was often the most difficult part to many clients I've worked with in the past. And they just need a nudge to get that blank page filled and moving forward. So promoting the use of the materials, I think, is probably a good way to twist the conversation, if you will. And I think that's what we've done here with RT365. So.
Well, that's great. I'm actually, I've heard more than people completely outside of the loop, and I'm very excited to see the tool that you guys have created. Could you go to the next question, Steve? So why should somebody want to attend the virtual summit? I'll toss that out to the three of you. Specifically your research presentation, RT365. So
well, I'll
Chuck?
start. Okay, go ahead, Chuck.
Maybe make it Robin then.
Yeah, Chuck will he'll take us home on it for certain. I think for RT365, we're offering, you know, I kind of touched on it in the last question. We're offering some very unique perspective and tools, updating where to find items. You know, we're not standing AWP on its ear. We're not releasing any new wonderful methodologies. What we're doing is we're completely helping you in road mapping the methodologies that are out there now. And wait till you see the tool that we've developed to help you with that. You need to come to the summit to see the release of it. This should be your new desktop best friend to help keep your AWP implementations in place, and that guru to answer those questions for you that everybody's been asking us for. Chuck?
Yeah, so Lloyd, as we work through the research, I think Robin would agree, there was an aha moment that many of us had. So we had completed the first phase of the research. We had identified all of the barriers. That was published in March. And we were all late last year sitting together after we had completed our phase 1 work, thinking, you know, where has this led us? And Newton, our grad student, had done a literature review. And when Newton presented the unbelievable depth of information that he had found on the internet, with various conferences, symposiums, case studies, and things like that relating to AWP, and we started to connect the dots between how much that information could directly relate to the barriers that we were identifying. That to me was the biggest aha moment, I think, for most of us. And that's what led to the development of the tool that Robin has mentioned. And that was the specific focus of the research, was how do we take this breadth of information that really kind of overwhelmed me, even somebody who'd been studying it for several years. How do we make that information available? And that's, I think, the biggest thing we're going to deliver to you next week.
Great. And Mike, you want to add any additional thoughts to this discussion?
Yeah, sure, Lloyd. Thanks. You know, I think that the research has something for everybody, right? Whether or not your company is just beginning that AWP journey, or if you're, you know, well down the path, right? We spoke about the AWP maturity earlier today, and that the barriers that different companies have had as low maturity or high maturity, but the content of their solutions, that's what I think should really grab you know, some companies looking to implement AWP and possibly help them move forward or off dead center on any of the barriers that they're touching. So you know, if any of those topics that we touched on today, like with you know, the cultural change or training, if you're curious about what some of the people in the industry have done for solutions for that'd be a good reason to go.
Well, thanks very much. So I guess that leads to a broader question. What is the virtual research summit that we're talking about? And historically, when CII has released their research information, it's been part of a bigger physical conference, and we've never had 5 AWP related research report outs at one time before. So this is pretty historic. Next slide, Steve. So one of the things you probably are curious about is, okay, so who's coming? We've got approximately 38% of the attendees that are registered right now are owners. Another 37% are contractors, and the other 25% are a whole bunch of different categories: technology companies, associations, consultants, and so on. Lots of people want to be on the leading edge. They want to know what's coming up next, and the summit is a way to do that. And if you're wondering, well, if I go to the summit, who else is going to be there? This is a partial list of the companies that are going to be participating in the summit. So you can see owners, contractors, technology companies, they're all going to be at this event. And CII is known for the quality of events that they put on. So these are companies that expect a very high level, and they feel they'll get it out of the virtual summit. And again, to show you who's involved and who believes, these are the sponsors for the event. And you can see lots of world-class companies, companies that are involved in implementing advanced work packaging, supporting it through technology, using it, on how they actually do their work. So every one of those companies has something that will contribute to advanced work packaging. And there will be a virtual sponsorship lounge and virtual sponsorship booths and people that you can talk to if you want to find out more about some of the tools and resources available to you. So this is the actual program for the event. And I got to say, it's pretty hard to find a situation where in one day you can see the related research on how to integrate your supply chain with AWP practices, how to incorporate commissioning, completion, and startup into your AWP program, how to promote advanced work packaging within your own organization and with your partners. And on the second day, we get into talking about, well, what are the data requirements for advanced work packaging, and that can influence how you put your contracts together. Also, we know how important materials are and equipment are. Well, how do I use digital threads to increase the visibility of my supply chain on capital projects? All of those things are going to be covered in the 2 days of the event. And that'll be happening September 1st and 2nd, which is Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And if you take a look at the logos on the other side, those are just a portion of the companies that are going to be involved in reporting out their findings next week. So top-notch organizations. Finally, Steve, and you're probably wondering, how do you register? There's a link on this slide that we'll be sending out to you after the meeting. But basically, if you're a CII member, you get a $175 rate. But if you belong to the community of practice, you're going to get a $200 rate. And if you're not associated with the community of practice or CII, then you'll pay $225. So just by joining the community of practice, you're going to be able to reduce the cost of going to the event. We've got some pretty sophisticated apps in place that will allow you to network with the people that are going to be there. And taking this program will give you 7 professional development points. So if you're like me, I've got my PMP, I'm always looking for how do I get some points to go towards my recertification. So with that, we're going to talk about, well, once the summit is over, what's going to happen next. And there is a virtual conference that Group ASI has organized in conjunction with CII, where we're going to be taking the work that's been developed by CII, and we're going to take industry professionals, and we're going to focus on, okay, so how do we keep this going? How do we move to the next step? And this is a pretty large event. We're going to have 7 plenary sessions, 3 kickoffs, 3 closes, and 25 track sessions. So if you want to find out about very specific aspects of advanced work packaging, this is a great way to do that. In March, we're going to have a physical conference in London, but it will have a virtual component, so you'll be able to plug into that as well. So just wanted you to know that the summit is going to introduce some fantastic research, and then we'll be following up on how to get the absolute most out of it at the AWP conference. So with that, let's go to roundtable. You'll be able to ask the panel questions, and I see it's already starting to fill up, but if you could go to the questions portion and send us a question, I will direct it to the appropriate team member. So Luigi, I know you're on the call. We've also got Mark Mehta and Mark Lambert. Maxim's on there. So we've got lots of people that are very knowledgeable about advanced work packaging, and we'd love to hear any questions that you have for us. So who would like to kick us off with a question? Luigi, do you have one for us? So maybe one of the things that I can do is I'll kick us off with the first question. So I'm an experienced, I like to think of myself as an experienced SME in advanced work packaging and a pretty loyal PMI member. But I know when I start to look for something, even when I know that something exists, I often find it really difficult to locate. So is that part of what you're going to be helping us with in your report out? Finding stuff? And, you know, without giving away too many details, can you kind of let us know how that's going to be helpful to me as a AWP professional? So, Robin, can I throw that one to you?
Sure, Lloyd. I think that's a very good point, and I think we've alluded to that a little bit through our discussion. That what our research, and as Chuck mentioned earlier, kind of showed us is that we needed a Rosetta Stone in the industry for how to find research, and we think we've done that. And you know, as you would, if you're staying in a hotel, go to talk to the concierge at the front desk. Come to our presentation at the summit, and you'll see what we've created to give you that same kind of experience.
Great. And we did get a question from Mark, and his question, and he even says, tough question. If a project implements AWP, does that guarantee that it's going to be successful? Let's toss that out to all three of you. So let's start with you, Chuck. What do you think?
Well, not at all. You know, as we, specific to this research, some of the barriers that we've identified in this were the barriers that exist between stakeholders, and the challenges that exist when all the stakeholders within a particular project aren't equally invested in all of this. So, you know, some of the research that we'll release next week will help specifically identify what some of those potential barriers and risks can be. But yeah, it's a tough question, Mark, but I would just say no, it's not automatic success.
And Mike, I know you've had some very successful initiatives in your working past. Does that mean that the next one's necessarily going to be a huge success?
Yeah, thanks for that question there. You know, I think if the one of the keys that we've found, at least in our experience, is making those key principles of AWP, like focusing on constraint-free work along that value chain, and then the key practice. You know, how do you take and make it scalable and fit for purpose for your particular job, and getting those team members involved with that, the planning for it plus the implementation of it. You know, that's a key. If it's not right sized for that particular project, they will, you know, we've had experience where we've struggled with that. So it really goes to making it right for the team, and what makes sense to them, what's practical for their project.
Great. And Robin, I can hear you got something to add.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good one. Great question. I think the key here is there's a couple aspects to this and a few nuances to it, right? Just implementing, what does that mean? The first thing is a lot of clients that want to get into it, they do it for several different reasons, and the reason you're doing it first has to be analyzed. That's a big one. Often a client will buy software and consider it the big red easy button, meaning we do AWP, we just bought software and we're good. We don't need to know anything else. Sometimes that's just awareness. Sometimes that's satisfying a contractual obligation. There's many reasons why an AWP implementation can fail, and it's often lack of commitment, as Mike was alluding to earlier. Lack of support from certain members can often allude to it. When it comes to an AWP transformation, the key word there is transformation. Understanding cultural change when it comes to AWP is key. In order to be truly effective with AWP, it becomes a step change in your organization and a new way of doing business. If you're not prepared for a cultural change and changing to an AWP type methodology, and you're planning on just adding this to your portfolio as a duplication of effort in some areas, that in itself will cause you to not be as effective. It needs to be analyzed from grassroots as far as where we're going to bring this in and to what extent and to what level the cultural change is going to be embraced for that and support that.
Hey, that's really good. We got another question. Do you have standard training courses to build AWP department details? So let me throw that back to the panel. Robin, you're also on the AWP CBA, are you not?
Yes, sir.
And so Mandy is heading up an initiative to put out some base materials. So I don't know if you are comfortable talking to that or any other training materials that you're aware of, but let's start with you and then let's go to Mike and to Chuck.
Yeah, you bet. I think there's a lot in this area to cover. I'll make it as brief as I can. First off, about the Mandy's group and the knowledge management, the educational and outreach group that she chairs within the CBA. Great group doing some amazing work. They're doing an excellent job of putting together what I would call an AWP primer. It's a tool to be used to give you an idea of how to walk the walk and talk the talk, if you will. That basic framework and layout of the things that you need to know for AWP. It's not going to teach you all the nuances of it, but again, it's a framework of the things that you need to learn. In the industry, there are many things moving forward. CII, I hope I'm not overstepping a future release, if you will, but CII is moving heavily towards having a certification for AWP within CII. Stay tuned for more information on that. We're talking about a CII sanctioned certification, so a real certification, not a privately held one, which is really going to hold some water within the industry. I'm very excited about that coming forward. I hope I didn't say too much, but it's coming and it's going to happen. There are other organizations doing great things around education. I don't want it to seem too self-serving, but ConstructX and other organizations like mine and others have a vast majority of training materials also that they supply into the industry. So there's a lot of areas to get it and some great things that are happening moving forward to really take things to the next level within our industry as well.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Robin. Mike or Chuck, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure, Lloyd. I think that for people that are curious about what the research showed, if we look at AWP maturity between view of AWP, work processes and deliverables, training, and implementation strategy, I think there'll be, you know, if you're curious about where the industry thought they were, that is something that's covered in the presentation, and also in the research, in the context of, you know, what are some of those solutions that the companies have provided as feedback with regards to training. And I think that's a real relevant and key topic for sure.
Great. And Chuck, anything you'd like to add?
Just to emphasize some points that both Robin and Mike have made, you know, there's a lot of information out there, but there's a lot more to come.
That's great. We've got a couple more questions that I'd like to raise. Sean's just asked, what is the goal of AWP implementation? Is it full adoption in the industry? Is the ultimate plan to make all of the AWP and informations and tools fully public? So that may be beyond our ability to answer, but give it a shot. What do you guys think?
Well, this is Chuck. I'll go first. I mean, I think there's a couple things involved in that question. The first one is, you know, what is your organization's goals for AWP adoption? And I think that is going to be individual to each organization. That is definitely one of the things that was identified in our surveys and research was, you know, there are standard concepts and principles, but the application of those concepts and principles can be unique to each organization. As far as the larger question about, you know, industry and AWP, I think there's a lot smarter people than me who are working on that one. So.
And any other thoughts or comments? I'm going to add.
For a minute, Lloyd, my audio cut out. I missed that last question.
Oh, sure. Basically, what the question is asking is the goal full adoption throughout the industry? And is there any plans to make the AWP information and tools fully public?
Well, to mirror some of the things Chuck said, I mean, the methodology of CII and the research is, and it being public, or at least somewhat easily accessed by the public, whether you're members or not, is a massive ability to start gathering that information. Is the charge to make AWP, you know, in every house, everybody's going to have AWP. Everybody must have AWP. I think it's a fit for purpose. It's what makes sense to those particular projects, those particular organizations. If you've got a small project and you've only got one, maybe that type of step change is not for you. But if you've got, say, one small project and that's accompanied by 50 other projects just like it, then absolutely. Or if you're into a mega project type situation or giga project situation, maintenance, shutdown, turnaround, there's multiple different reasons to look at it and not look at it. A good analysis of if it's right to you is always, if it's right for you, is always key before embarking on what can be an expensive journey to be more productive. So the keys are what are your goal outcomes and analyzing that. The information's there. Part of what 365 has done is help you find it. So it's a matter of, is this right for me? Is this implementation going to change my world?
Yeah, and Lloyd, just to add on to what Robin and Chuck, you know, touched on, you know, for Black & Veatch, you know, we were looking at the CII best practice, and right there's several other best practices, right? But how do we use that and you know, improve our performance? You know, that how could it improve our safety, to keep our professionals safe, our quality, to get it right the first time, and drive that value, you know, throughout our project delivery for ourselves and the clients. So, you know, those are some of the reasons that, you know, Black & Veatch is heading down the AWP journey, right? So
That's great. And I will just point out, I think everybody on the call, on the panel, sorry, is actually a CII member company, but the research that's developed by CII is also available for sale to the public. So you know, for a fairly modest price, especially if you're working on a mega project. Even if you're not a CII member, you still have access to this information. If you are a CII member, then you can download all this information because it's included in your membership. But I strongly recommend, especially this particular research team's work. Once it's available, you really need to get a copy of it because it will go a long way to helping you in the implementation of AWP in your organization. We've got another question here about how scalable is AWP? And the question is, you know, $50,000 project, $5 million project, you know, how scalable is AWP is the question. So, Robin and Mike, I mean, you both are using this within your own organizations and client organizations. How scalable do you feel AWP is?
Well, I think, I mean, AWP is completely scalable, and there's always portions of the model that can be used in any organization. You know, I used the common explanation that when my wife and I got married, I work packaged our wedding, and I quite literally did. But to that end, you know, that's a little tongue in cheek. There is certain cause and effect benefits that you need to analyze as far as making the commitment, but you need to identify what portion of the model or how far you're going to go into it to get that benefit. I kind of alluded to it earlier. If you've got one $500,000 project, are you going to spend $1.5 million implementing AWP? Obviously, that would be silly, right? But if you've got 100 of those projects, then absolutely that expenditure makes sense. Now, the scalability of it, of the aspect of it, the methodologies are scalable at just about any level. It's understanding how to clearly identify the stakeholders, understanding how to clearly identify and break down the work structures, and how to effectively transfer that information to the field. That's at the highest level what it's all about. So scalable at the ultimate level. But you know, if you take all of the CII research at face value and try to implement it, you're going to have issues. So you need to understand what your scaling program is going to look like. And Lloyd, you had done some excellent research, and I believe you released a paper on the scalability of AWP that kind of helps to encompass how you would do that pre-assessment of what would best suit your job, which I think is some very good research that was published there, Lloyd.
Thanks for that, Robin. If anybody's interested, on the COA website, we have a report on scalable AWP. It's free of charge. So Steve, if you could add the link to the COA website to this presentation, then when it's sent out, you'll all be able to follow up if you want to. Any other comments before I go to our last question?
Yeah, Lloyd, this is Chuck. If you remember, we worked with Group ASI and COA last year to look at the scalability of the technology aspects of AWP. That work culminated in a presentation of our white paper at your conference last year, both in London and in Houston, and that information is out in the public domain. So if someone would like to see what were the conclusions and research from the technology aspects of scalability, that also exists.
Steve, could you add the link to the white paper that Chuck's describing? And I believe that's also free of charge. So we'll make sure that's in the slide deck as well. And then finally, we got a question from Mark. It says, John Fish mentioned the other day that a client read all the deliverables associated with an EWP and that it is quite a bit for every EWP. Are there minimum requirements? So I think this gets back into what we were just asked about scalability. If you're doing a giga project, is an EWP going to look the same as for a fairly small projects. So maybe let's start with Mike on that one.
Hey, thanks, Lloyd. You know, that scalable part, you know, the other thought I had on that previous question just for a second was not only can you scale AWP for small projects or large, but we did get some feedback through the research that maybe you just do a portion of the job. You know, you're just doing piping with AWP, or you're just doing steel with AWP. You know, what makes sense for that particular project. So, you know, I think down that, go ahead, Lloyd.
Oh, I was just going to say that's a great point.
So I think kind of in that same vein, you know, in EWP for electrical discipline, right, is a little bit different than what it might be for a piping or a steel or a civil discipline. So I think there's some other things there that, you know, go to the content or the size of the EWP, right? That you can think about and what makes sense for what's that superintendent or construction manager, you know, looking for in that package that's going to help them as they move into WorkFace planning. And that's really the focus, you know, to help keep that constraint-free work going and help support WorkFace planning later on. So those are my thoughts on that.
No, that's great. Robin?
I think that's an excellent question. And the reason why I think that's an excellent question is it's a cringe-worthy section of the 272 materials. And what I mean by that is you have to kind of take a step back and understand when the original 272 materials were written. It was during a time where we had hard and fast document control organizations and document control departments. Before we moved into more of a transmittal-based technological solution of controlling our documentation. So back then, the EWP was strictly viewed as an actual printable, visible document with a template, and this was a deliverable hard copy type thing. We don't really look at the EWP that way anymore. The EWP is more of a web of connectivity of engineering documents and requirements tied to a construction schedule. And that web of requirements as to when they are required for the field to execute is kind of the format of the EWP. So we've kind of migrated away from that physical hard copy document to now what we call more of a relationship-based linkage between the engineering deliverables to the contractual requirements of contractors in the field. So it becomes more of like a linkage and a lookup table than a physical document that's riddled with massive amounts of information to read, as was cited in that item there. So you know, when you read through materials like 272, you kind of have to look at when in time and how maybe we have evolved. And that's a perfect instance of where we've kind of evolved from the original research.
Great. So I see we've actually hit 2 o'clock, and the project manager in me is screaming. We've got to begin and end on time. But I just want to thank the panel for a very thoughtful, very well organized presentation. And if you have any questions, please use the chat feature to send them to us, and I'll reach out to the panel to get them to give you their thoughts after this session. But again, thanks to everybody who attended and everyone who presented, and hope to see you all at the summit next week.
Thank you very much, Lloyd.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd.